here. And so I'm going to do a quick introduction. If you have your phone with you, go ahead and take that out, scan that QR code. It should reach from far back. But I would love for you guys to kind of check out these. We have three very special panelists. I'm not going to be able to go over all their information, but I want you to have it. So go ahead and take out your phones right now. And you can flash a lovely picture of them while you're at it. But check out that QR code so that you can get that full bio of them. We are going to take our fireside chat, and then we will also go into our winners, and then have time to also mix and mingle and network. So, let me flip to the correct page. Perfect. All right, first up we have Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who is the Secretary of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Secretary Chen began her career as the Assistant Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And prior to her public service, Secretary Chen worked for more than 30 years in the private sector. Give a round of applause for Secretary Chen. Our second panelist is Dr. Martine Burt. Dr. Martine Burt is world-renowned social entrepreneur who has developed various anti-poverty and educational social innovations that are currently being implemented in 55 countries. More now? Wow. We just wrote this yesterday. He is the founder in 1985 and CEO of Fundacion in Paraguay, a social enterprise named Latin America's most impactful and innovative development organization by the Inter-American Development Bank. Give a round of applause for that one. That's amazing. He has served as Chief of Staff to the President of Paraguay, and he has received several awards from many esteemed organizations and is a visiting professor of a social entrepreneurship at Worcester Polytechnic Institute and Research Associate at University of California, Irvine. I'm not sure what Polytechnic means. What does that mean? I didn't mean to call you out. No? Or we just don't want to get into it. I love that. I love that. Round of applause for Dr. Martine Burt. And lastly, we have our facilitator, Micelle. I love having another Micelle up here. Micelle Jaconi is head of news talent strategy and development for the Washington Post. In her role, she works with Post journalists to develop new approaches to build trust, engagement, and audiences around quality journalism. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Jaconi has earned multiple awards for her contributions, including the Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Media for producing the Meet the Press Senate Debate Series, which is a Peabody Award at CNN. Give her a round of applause for that. That's amazing. And she's also had back-to-back Breaking News Emmy Awards for presidential election nights at 2 networks, both CNN and NBC. Our facilitator, Michelle.
I love a good Michelle. Boom. Okay. And you can tell from the fact that I loved election nights that I love Washington, D.C., so that's where we're going to start. I think just like Mary Frances rebranded philanthropy as for purpose, I'm going to rebrand Washington. There's a secret. It's not a swamp. It's actually full of people like you who want to make a difference. And so I want to start here. First, Dr. Burt, tell me what Washington, D.C. means to you.
Oh, it's very easy. I was a graduate student here at GW, and I fell in love with an American girl.
Woo!
So we got married, and then we've been married 40 years now and living in Paraguay when I, together with her, developed this thing. So Washington to me is a place where it all started. We were very poor and in love. So apart from that, this is a place that defines the problem, and then it is spread throughout the world. So this is a very, very serious issue because, for example, poverty is defined here. 2 definitions. The Department of Agriculture during the War on Poverty, during the Kennedy and the Johnson administration, defined poverty as the cost of a basket of food. And they developed something called the poverty line. That if you're under that poverty line, you're poor, and if you're above that poverty. That was a magnificent effort, but it was defined here. The World Bank defines poverty as $3 per person per day. Okay? So the whole capitalist system is based on that definition. And so you go to Uganda, you go to South Africa, and it's all the American definition, right? Which is good, but it is also lacks the, what does it mean for you, a Nigerian woman, to be not poor? That is lacking. And so now I developed a methodology that allows families to self-diagnose their level of poverty in their own terms, and using an app and everything. And the good thing is that we are using it in the US. Why? Because poverty is defined in this country. So if I want my innovation to go to Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, it has to be accepted here. I understand the big fish eats the small fish, so I'm not angry at that. So I'm working with Cornell University in upstate New York, with University of North Carolina, with University of California, Irvine, Pepperdine, with this effort to get academia, thought leaders, and politicians and capitalists to understand that we will never solve poverty in this beautiful country if we don't consult with the interested party. And there are two types of decision makers. Decision makers, for example, in Sacramento, but also decision makers at the family household level. The mother is the most important decision maker in the world. And she has to be heard, listened to, asked, what does it mean for you to be not poor? So this has been a beautiful journey, as you can imagine. Because, no, my country is very different. Really? No, you wouldn't understand. Really? You know what? Every single mother in the world cares about feeding the kids, making sure that the boy or the girl does not go with the wrong company, that they eat well, that they brush their teeth or not, that they finish their school, and that they get a good job and marry the right person, in general. So what does Washington mean to me? Whew. From the personal love of my life, I can still remember my mom said, do not marry an American. Why? She'll take you away. And her father said, don't marry a Mexican. But he's not Mexican. They're all Mexican. We've had a beautiful life, we've had a beautiful life.
I love that. No better way to get my attention than a love story. It's so wonderful. Madam Secretary, your personal biography is intertwined with this city. Can you tell us a little bit about Washington?
Oh, Washington. The way I think about Washington is that it is the seat of democracy. And a lot of good happens here. And it is filled with lots of people wanting to do good. I can share with you a couple of stories. The first is that I learned about the January 6th riots on my way into work, and I had a 9 o'clock meeting that I was chairing. And I wanted to acknowledge what happened. And, but emotions overcame me, and I was in tears. And my deputy had to take over. why was that such a momentous day for me? When my family and I left Taiwan in 1971, we lived under martial law. I didn't know anything else. We lived under martial law. And well into my 30s, I had my first opportunity to come to Washington to spend time advocating for people with liver disease. And it was a day on a hill with lobbyists. And I remember walking through the halls and looking at these doors thinking, do we just walk in? How is that even possible? And yes, our lobbyist said to me, yes, you just walk in. We have the privilege to just walk in and make our case. And so I've since had many opportunities to come to Washington, go to different senators and representatives' offices, talk to lots of staffers, meet with senators, meet with representatives. We are filled, the city is filled with people who are thinking about how to help somebody else. And it's a beautiful place. It is a beautiful, beautiful place. So I, of course, work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And after hearing all of you in your presentations, I actually want to import all of you to Massachusetts because you will be doing so much good in Massachusetts. No, I love my state, and we all do a lot of good, but I love hearing your ideas. And gosh, you know, I don't want to be a judge downstairs right now. Tough job, tough job. So that's what Washington means to me.
I love it. And one of the things that's so fun today is that this panel has experience in entrepreneurship, academia, government, private sector, public sector, you name it, they have experience, both of them. And so one of the things that is hard to do is to take in this world and make a mission off of something that's hard to measure, right? So what you did, your example of taking a new measurement, creating your own data, saying that data is broken, is so important, especially to Mary Francis's point of saying all of the measurements, all of the control is built on, that's not the community we want to help. So how do you get new measurements, new motivation for things like sustainability and morality that aren't necessarily tied in equal quarterly statements?
You're going to punt the difficult question to me? Immediately, right. Look at that. I think women make all the decisions, right? I think that's what you said. So I'm going to punt it back to you.
Great. Okay. The beauty of life is innovation. The problem with innovation, in my experience, is that one has a small brain. So there are limited things that one can come up with. So one has to be open to other people who see what it's right there under our nose and we don't see. And the same thing, for example, I started Paraguay's first development nonprofit because we were also living under military dictatorship and I couldn't use my degree from the United States over there. And I started a microfinance program with a Boston-based organization called Acción International. Then some college kids came to me and said, listen, we know about an American program called Junior Achievement that is a perfect thing for you. And I said, really? Yeah, because you are providing financial loans to the street vendor, but their children need to be taught entrepreneurship and how to set up a business. Okay. Then So we had the two programs, a program for adult street vendors and a program for schools, creating business clubs in every school in the country. And then I got approached by a priest many years later. He says, listen, we would like to gift you our campus and our agricultural high school. What religion are you from? Catholic. First time I see a Catholic giving up some real estate. No. Have you heard? And listen to this. He says, I've been observing you. And we have been teaching young farmers how to grow tomatoes. And it has been a complete failure. Because not because you teach kids how to grow tomatoes will they be successful farmers. No. Why? Because the problem is not how to grow tomatoes. The problem is how to make money with tomatoes. And you have the tools for farmer education. I do? Yes. And so 20 years ago now, today in March, we took over this agricultural school with 120 acres and buildings, and we turned it into a social enterprise, whereby every class, project-based learning in the first year of high school, and learning by doing, which is the typical technical version, we added the two things that we knew, learning by doing, selling and making money, and bingo. That was the explosion, because kids love to make money. And you teach them the formula, and then the girl says, excuse me, I can just combine a vegetable garden, a cheese little factory, some chicken, and I can make $2,000 a month? Yeah. Well, hello. And they took off. The school became the world's first financially self-sufficient agricultural school, that education that pays for itself. And we started exporting this, and we set up schools in Brazil, in Mexico, in Colombia, in Central America, in South Africa, Tanzania, Nigeria, all over the world. And that is where something weird happened, because we saw kids levitating out of poverty, but they did not have any money. Remember the war on poverty? They didn't have any money. And their parents had a little money. They were living above the poverty line, but they were still poor. No teeth, terrible toilet, so we said, what is poverty? And the literature said it's $3 per person per day. No, it doesn't know. And so we developed the poverty stoplight by asking the people, what does it mean for you to be poor? And they told us what we expected. Oh, you got to have money, check. You got to have drinking water, check, perfect. You got to have a stove, an elevated stove, check. Refrigerator, check. Everything was, and then you have to have self-esteem. You have to control your emotions. You have to have a life map. You have to live in an environment free of violence. And this, what's more important, drinking water or controlling your emotion? But of course, the answer is easy. Well, what? Controlling your emotions. We would be in a meeting with 600 women and says, raise your hands, what's more important, controlling your emotions or drinking water? 90% controlling your emotions. The reason why she doesn't have any drinking water is because she doesn't get along well with people. She can't. The reason why my brother-in-law can't keep a job is really not that there are no factories in the village, is that he, etc. And then I was talking, and I'll finish with this, I was talking at the World Economic Forum with a meeting, and this Swiss economist said, oh, just like Anna Karenina. Anna Karenina? Yeah, the novel by Leo Tolstoy. That big fat book that the teacher wanted us to read in high school and I never read it. Yeah, what you're talking is that. What? The first line in the book. What are you talking about? All happy families are alike, and each unhappy family is unhappy in their own way. Bingo. But how can we absorb your 50 indicators, and you're going to be red, yellow, and green, and your next door neighbor is going to be different, everything in an app? So all of a sudden, technology can allow us to have the micro personalization of poverty plans. And so not a development plan for the country or for the region or for the city, for each family household. No, but it's really complicated. They all have Facebook, they all have WhatsApp. And so it's been a beautiful journey, and I have a very strict partner who says, but you didn't take into account my wife, you know, you know.
All comes back to the love story.
So that's basically, so innovation, be exposed to what other people have seen in you that you don't see. So, and since you cannot predict the future, expose yourself to as many ideas as possible.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, one of the things that we always talk about in entrepreneurship is that moment that you have to release a little control to make that idea bigger than yourselves. How have you achieved that and getting that mission sync, but you have to let go a little to have that collective contagion of innovation?
It's very hard, particularly if you're the founder. I don't consider myself having very good ideas, so I'm not usually the founder, but I capture others' ideas and try to grow them. And I would say that there's a lot of excitement when you're first trying to get something going, and based on what I've heard, you are all really, really good at making the pitch. But every project, every company goes through a period of time when it's just in the doldrums, and you've got that rough period of time, and you know, whether it's, sometimes it's called the ugly duckling stage, and I certainly have projects like that where we bring on new people, and the first group gelled really, really well, and then we bring somebody on who has the expertise to help us take it to the next level, except this person comes in and doesn't know how to say the right thing in the meeting, speaks just uses different words, has a different set of ideas about how fast we should be going or what we should be doing, and the whole thing gets kind of messed up for a little bit. And I would say that when you go through periods like that, you just got to focus on what is it that we're trying to do. And when you bring new team members on, you've got to rethink each person's role. Because you've added, let's say you start with 3 and you add a 4th, you can't hang on to the old roles that you had. You're now a different entity, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. And so every time you add on a person or a new thing, you've got to sit back and make some observations and say, okay, how do we make the most of who we are at the table and what we're trying to do to take it to that next level that's in our vision? So that would be my advice.
It's a great advice. I am a big believer in questions, so I'm going to open up to questions after my next one, okay? So I want you to start thinking, giving you a warning. In Washington, we have a lot of highly scrutinized startups called campaigns. Okay, so I cover them for a living, and it's super fun. And one of my favorite things I ever get to do is I interview the campaign managers after presidential campaigns. And after the 2008 campaign, I asked the Romney campaign what they had questions for the Obama campaign. And this young person from the Romney campaign said, "How did you get permission to do what you did in Iowa?" We were all watching it and so jealous. All the young people at the Romney campaign thought it was brilliant. All the older people thought it was crazy. And we just want you to know, how did you get your candidate to yes? And the young digital director for the Obama campaign said, "Well, it was the highest paid person in the room rule." And I said, "Wait, you have to tell us, what does that mean?" And he said that David Axelrod came up with a rule that said anytime the highest paid person in the room made a decision, somebody had to challenge it. And he was afraid people, because he noticed that people would be like, "Axelrod's here," right? And they're going to 50 states. And so every time Axe was in town, it was a big deal, right? And so he is also tall and imposing. And so he knew that, but he also knew that they're running a social enterprise campaign. You have to listen to the people on the ground who know more than you, but might be too intimidated to speak up. And especially for a candidate, running on change, you really have to listen to the people at the little room. And so he actually made it practice. He traveled with somebody who would yell it anytime Axelrod made a decision. "Highest paid person in the room," and then it would break. And then everybody who was, a volunteer in Nevada or whatever would look around, going, "What are we supposed to do?" And they would say, "Challenge him. Anybody challenge him." And a young volunteer who was paid zero, who worked 25 hours, a day practically, in Iowa, this woman named Grace, who said, "Hi, I actually think that you should do it this way." And everybody's like, "That is so much better." And Axe was like, "Grace, your idea is better than mine," and took her idea. And so how do you channel that? Like, how do you, in social enterprise, when you're going into these places, and how do you get, as you grow, that ability to include others in challenging you, who are both charismatic, amazing people?
It's really hard. And I live in a world where I am called Madam Secretary. It's hard because there is a formality and a hierarchy that's very visible in every meeting that I'm in. And so I try to, if I am chairing a meeting, I always close the meeting by asking, is there anything else? Are there other comments? And I often will ask that twice to give people some courage to say some more. And it is very hard because I do live in this world where it doesn't come to me until it's been through lots of editing. And it doesn't come to me until it's been through lots of workshopping again and again, and months and months and months. And so it's hard. I with my management team, I have Monday and Wednesday morning meeting, and I don't chair it. I'm just sitting there. My deputy chairs it, and we have rotating note-taking. I'm on the rotation. And I try to, you see, the problem is when I'm in a meeting, even in a dynamic and a structure like that, if I say something, if I make a statement or open my mouth about something, then everyone goes, "Oh, that's how she thinks, that's what she's thinking." And we just have to check ourselves. And sometimes I'll start sentences by saying, "I'm just thinking out loud. I haven't thought this through. I don't have a particular perspective on this." I'll often start sentences like that. So I have a few of these phrases that I'll use.
That's great. Are there any questions? Oh, great. Thank you, Bree. Turning Bree into Oprah here. Sorry. Thank you.
I've always wanted to be.
Oh, you Oprah. Oh, my God. Bree can do anything. I wrote for Bree for Oprah.
Thank you. My name is Mecca, and I'm from Rwanda. It's the smallest country in Africa. And I have a question that goes to Madam Secretary. When you started, you said something about democracy, the seat of democracy being in Washington. And we have had a big problem in Africa whereby, I think it's everywhere in the world minus the US, whereby we are imposed to believe that whatever America believes is what we should believe. So the democracy we have is tried to define by Americans. the way we live, Hollywood is influencing the way we live, the way we dress, and that is sometimes not like good. But since this is not like a political conversation, I'll try to bring it to the social entrepreneurship. What would you advise? Should I copy what you do here and go apply it in my country when I know it's not going to work? Or how do we meet in the middle of you understanding that Africans or other countries have a way of defining their own concepts depending on the reality they live in, and also to meeting on you, on your table of what you believe in? What would you advise as the best way to do it? Thank you.
I would never advise you to do something that you think is not going to work. You know. Who am I to tell you that it's going to work and challenge you, right? I would never advise you to do that. I might ask you why you think it's going to work and why you think a certain way is not going to work. I personally do not believe democracy should exist everywhere in the world. Some countries, it's better off it doesn't, right? Singapore, benign dictator, works awfully well. I've been to Singapore. I wish I lived in Singapore, right? So I live in Boston, and I jokingly say, our roads are worse than Italy. And in Italy, we've got potholes and things are, you drive through rubble all the time. And in Boston, we do the same, right? And it's worse. I think it's worse. So democracy is not the answer to every place. We need to respect how every country has evolved. What I am not an advocate for are places where you have the non-benign dictators who take funding from every country in the world and keep it for themselves. Cambodia, places where the person in charge becomes hugely, hugely wealthy. There are no roads, no schools, no hospitals, nothing for people. So I would say for social entrepreneurship, you have to listen to what you think is going to work in your country.
Thanks, Grace.
Hello. Sorry, my voice is insane. This pollen in DC is a monster. My allergies are insane. But this question is more directed at the concept of families redefining poverty or defining poverty for themselves. I am really seeking to go into the childcare sector. I have been a nanny for a long time, and I'm really trying to look at how employers engage with employer-subsidized childcare without necessarily receiving a lot of tax incentive. But for you, I would really love to know, if we're redefining poverty, we also have to redefine what social mobility is for families. So I really thank you for introducing that to me, because as much as I strive to create access to social mobility for women and families, I think that challenging the notion of what I consider mobility is also something that is important. And so doesn't just look like being promoted, or it doesn't just look like increase in salary. So how would you define social mobility for families?
Okay, that's very, very important. There's a famous economist, Amartya Sen, who developed a theory of capabilities, that development is freedom. And so an older woman in Rwanda who decides to take care of her grandchildren and not generate money, is she poor or not poor? Do you understand? And this is global, about women deciding, I will be wealthy in motherhood and I will have less money, less cash. Or other women that I'm sure your generation is struggling with this disaster. So that is one thing, How does a family? Another thing has to do with that. There's an American psychologist called Ken Wilber, and he talks about integral approach. So there is a part that has to do with your behavior and what you do. Also, all the obstacles in the system. In some cases, the reason why you do not have teeth is because you do not brush your teeth. In other cases, the reason why you have dental problem is because there's not a dentist in the thing. And in other cases, like in my country in South America, if you're 20, you better have perfect teeth. But if you're 80, it's okay if you're missing a couple of teeth. Because you're 80 and you're a grandmother and everybody loves you anyway. How interesting. So culture has to do with that. Then there are levels of consciousness. And some people are self-centered and egotistical. So they only care about themselves. And then they only care about themselves and their family. Others care about themselves, their family, their neighborhood, and different levels of. So you have to really ask, what is social mobility, mean, and then you can have, when in using the stoplight methodology, green, I have social mobility, and I feel that I can escalate green. There are people in my neighborhood who have moved, but somebody, yellow, or we're screwed in this part of the country. We can't get over. But it is, and I can help you defining what it means. And it's a beautiful process of self-discovery, because you have to respect people's culture, but you also have your own culture. So I'll tell you what, if you go to a country like Rwanda, where there are people that do not believe in girls' education, like is my country. Boys have more preference than girls. I don't believe in that. I believe in girls' education. So do I, in my country, promote school for girls or not? It goes against the culture of many people. Or with the indigenous nations. I'm working with indigenous nations with issues of family violence, because there are many indigenous men who believe that it is okay to get drunk and beat up their women. I don't believe in that. What should I do? Respect their culture or do something about it? What do you think? Me? Yeah.
Well, I believe that you would survey. Okay, I'm trying to teeter the line because yes, I believe that you should step in and create something that's going to help the situation. However, it would have to come in a very delicate way that is culturally appropriate, so that you are marrying their culture with what you believe, and that should help to create a more succinct synergy in order for you to do what you need to do to help the families that are in need.
But it is heavy.
Yes.
It is heavy. My grandmother was a big leader of the women's movement in my country, all the time in jail, because she was in favor of women's right to vote. Culturally, we are machista, and we are Latins, and I don't like that part of my culture, so I want to change it. So I think all of us are living in our own communities, having our own values, respecting other people's values, but don't forget about your values. I mean, let's listen what the community men want. No. Yes.
Well, I would say that it takes recontextualizing. Instead of thinking or addressing communities for what we feel like they lack, it is empowering the things that they do have. And so if we're using the example of indigenous communities, they actually have a desire to be a community, and that is a better starting point than the brokenness.
But it is a beautiful journey. Yeah. It is a beautiful journey because you know that there are things that you do not see, other people see, and you are in a Pepperdine University program right now, but 10 years from now, you will have been, and you will remember this session and saying, God, so it's very beautiful. And this thing about Singapore, I know, because I'm a pure, half of my life I lived under a military boot. And my parents in jail and my grandparents in jail, so I know, and I've been to Singapore. and you know, and I said, look at these guys, you know, they're you know. So it's tough. It's tough, but it's a beautiful journey. So surround yourself by your tribe. Your own family sometimes are going to say, don't do it. You're going to do it again. No. Why even try? You know? Don't listen to them. Surround yourself by your tribe. Those people say, you're going to do some healthy soap? Yeah. You know? And surround us and find a person to love and who will love you back. Because it's, as the Bible says, two is better than one.
One of the great things is the fierce urgency of now, which is, of course, Martin Luther King's statement that was made famous again on the I Have a Dream speech down the street, very close. And one of the silver linings of COVID, right? We all know all of the bad of COVID, but one of the silver linings of COVID is that there is this hunger for meaning. One of the biggest Google searches for the 2 years was actually people going to Google and what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? Isn't that staggering that, one, people were searching for truly the meaning of life? And that's why I loved listening to our entrepreneurs today, how there was so much purpose-driven purchasing, purpose-driven community, purpose-driven help. Like, that is something that this city prides itself on, right? How have you seen that hardship from COVID spring out creative solutions where people realize that narcissism isn't going to save them? Like, you see people now realizing, as you said, having people realize you need a community or community solutions, and you just can't be me all the time. That is remarkable. Like, that is a big difference from the 80s, right? Like, we are in a moment of communal awareness. What did you see in your countries or your state,
massive
Commonwealth?
Catastrophe with COVID because we followed the World Health Organization's advice. And we put up the money, and then they didn't send us the vaccines. And last minute, the Americans sent 2 airplanes full of vaccines, or else it would have been chaos. So really. Another thing that we saw during the vaccine, the rich countries said, we will triple, quadruple vaccinate our own people first, and then we're going to, you know, so this United Nations thing, you know, in times of need, exactamente. So it's just big fish, small fish. Yeah. I work with 80,000 street vendors and shopkeepers, women mostly, and they thrived. They thrived in their resilience and adapting to using Facebook and WhatsApp to sell because they could. But education was a catastrophe because the mothers couldn't work because their children were in the house, and they couldn't work. So let's say that you have a shop in the house and you also clean an office. You can't clean the office because so it was very, very difficult, and yeah, it was difficult. And now we have another mosquito that I can't even pronounce the name. It's called chikungunya, and it's a mosquito that is a bone breaker. It just completely disarms you. I know. I know. Yeah. So we tell the Pepperdine University students to visit a repellent every 10 minutes, and yeah, but that is the reality. Dengue fever with the mosquitoes, and so there are issues out there that affect people. But as social entrepreneurs that you are, every single problem is an opportunity. So you go into a neighborhood and this is, there is no daycare. Yes, love it. Mom, there is no daycare. I'm going to make a lot of money. Or equivalent.
Madam Secretary, what about you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
COVID was really hard in Massachusetts. It's been hard everywhere, but we were one of the first states to be struck. And I remember very early on, there were evenings when I would be a part of a group, getting on the phone call at 8 o'clock at night, having heard that 100 people had died that day in nursing homes across the state. and where were we going to send the National Guard the next day, because we were down on staff, and there were some very, very hard times. A lot of ingenuity came out of that time. So the PCR tests, initially, I think it took a week to go down to the CDC and come back, maybe 2. You know, I have COVID fog because I just can't remember all that we did in these 3 years. But it used to take a long time. And MIT came up with a way, they're engineers, but they're also academics. And usually you don't think about academics doing production level work. They're inventors, but they can't like rinse and repeat the same time again. But MIT came up with a way so that they did all of our state's testing, and within 24 hours we had results. And I think within a year or 2 into COVID, we were getting results in 12 hours. So they developed an app. You made your reservations on the app, and we could also see where the slots were, where the empty slots were. So you could drive, or you could do whatever you wanted to do. And you go, and it worked beautifully. And so that's part of a wonderful thing that came out of COVID, right? Other wonderful things that came out of COVID related to just the goodness in people showed up. And maybe because we were all just like pinned in at home or something, but the goodness in people showed up. We have 350 towns in Massachusetts. There's a council on aging, a senior center in every single one of them. The directors of councils on aging were either going to homes and knocking on doors to make sure people were okay, or were calling them to make sure people were okay, older people were okay. I went to visit directors, and I said, how did you get through that first year? It was so tough on all of us, particularly those of us who work with older people. And they're mission driven, and they said, well, I was sitting at home, there was nothing to do. Normally we have exercise classes, we have lunches, we have this, we have that. There was nothing to do, so I decided, oh my goodness, I need to just call people, make sure they're okay. And that took away the isolation, the loneliness from people, especially when you're older. And 1/3 of older people over age 60 live alone. So you can imagine, you feel fragile, and you're left alone. You're not supposed to go out. If you go to the grocery store, you could risk dying just from breathing the air. Those were the circumstances people lived under, right? Another town decided to do oral histories, and they recorded oral histories of older people to just to give so that we could all bear witness. It was shown at an evening event. It was beautiful. And they talked about the resilience of the hard times they've lived through in the past. Some were immigrants. They've talked about living through war. This is a generation that lived through World War II. They've lived through the Korean War. They've lived through the Vietnam War. They talked about times of scarcity and how they've survived those times. And they finished on, we know we will get past this. And it's just a matter of being careful and being hopeful. We know we will get through it. And here we are.
So great. Do we have time for one more question? Do we have another question? No? Okay, back.
I'm a number person. And so you mentioned this 80,000 food cart program. Could you elaborate on that? And I want to know, does the cart have the ability to lift people out of poverty, where poverty is, and what the definition of poverty is in its service area?
Yes, thank you. Yes, microfinance programs give unsecured loans, very small loans, starting with $100 to a woman that is illiterate, doesn't have an address that you could reach because she lives in a village or a slum. And yes, with a loan, she can buy more merchandise. So the three objectives that are achieved are strengthen a precarious job, increase family income, and create new jobs. So I think, for example, by reaching some 450,000 in the past 35 years or so, that we have supported the creation of some 350,000 jobs. Yeah, but the thing is that
applause, like,
it's not. Yeah. I didn't do it; they did it. But what's interesting is that women are so family oriented that when you support, you know how there are a whole bunch of little sayings about it. You know, but when you actually support a mother, you are supporting the woman, the children, health, education, housing, and men, not necessarily. So I live in a very machista society. It's awful. It's awful. For example, I have 4,500 groups of women. I'm the biggest women's organization in the history of my country. Can you what a bad thing for my country that I am that? You know? I cannot get groups of men because they don't know how to work together. And I can't get co-ed groups because if there are boys and girls in a group, guess who has to be the number one of the president? And men have such a vulnerable ego. And so, are you Paraguayan or something?
I like this.
And so you have to navigate. You have to navigate these things. But yes, we are. But if you do not supplement, financial assistance with financial education, because it doesn't matter if she goes from earning $400 a month to $1,200 a month. If she does not know how to budget, if she knows how to save, if she does not have an alternative income, if she does not know how to work with her community, if she does not know how to report family violence, if a whole bunch of other things, she will fail. One child gets sick, she can't go to work that day. Those other kids don't eat. So trying to move out of this machista thing and teaching new masculinities is very interesting, And of course, I was raised machista also. And my wife, and it is very difficult because it's a culture thing. And I have to start thinking also. So, maybe by the time I grow up, I will, But for example, I'll tell you something. When I see a TV program, and we're having dinner with my wife, and I said, look, how attractive the TV presenter is. And she says, don't say that. Why not? Because you're not supposed to say that. Huh? So I'm trying to re-educate myself. And then I forget. But I'm trying. I'm honestly trying. It's difficult. It's difficult, And of course, my kids are my worst judges.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Martine Burt, Madam Secretary. Thank you so much, and thank you. Great questions. Great questions. Great questions. Wonderful. Pass it back to Michelle.